Welcome to the Season 3 Ward's Way podcast, where we're covering the hot legislative topics of 2025. From tariffs to tunnels and bridges. From foreign trade zones to workers' compensation. To the Fort Lauderdale International Boat Show. To the Marine Research Hub. Industry experts and clarification on the B1, B2 visas. Join us as we celebrate 75 years in business, and we're just getting started. So I think we should talk about, let's talk about where we ended up with CBP. What happened in Palm Beach and then what caused the meeting that was had recently earlier this month.
So every year at FLIBS, we host a captain and crew.
FLIBS, Fort Lauderdale International Boat Show?
Thank you.
Okay.
I assume the world knows.
I know. Well, the world does know us, but...
We host a captain and crew panel where we invite higher ranking and local agents from Customs and Border Prevention and U.S. Coast Guard, and anybody else that has some relevant information. A couple of times when the tax cap was new or the refit and repair tax cap was instituted, we'd have like a CPA that helped us institute it come and talk about what the regulations were. So it's just an information, open conversation, not the us and them kind of guys, so we can get to know each other. And it's been,
and I've been to those. They're very successful. I mean, it seems like a lot of dialogue going back and forth. I feel like the officers are there, very patient, answer the questions that I think they've answered multiple times, but they'll answer them again.
Yeah, and yes, it works really well, and a couple of the agents that usually attend that thought that would be a good idea to do it during the Palm Beach Boat Show.
Makes sense.
And they gave them a venue to do it, and I helped them with giving out the invitations to get people to come, the agencies to come. They sent a supervisor and two experienced agents from CBP Palm Beach.
Okay.
I think that they were a little overwhelmed with the questions because it had been announced that we were being strong on immigration and so there's that higher sense of concern about being legally in the country and so it's a sensitive topic at least as far as crew is concerned. It's a sensitive topic because a lot of our boats are foreign flag and a lot of our crew are because the boat's foreign flag, they're foreign as well. And so it was timely. And the questions started simply enough. And then he didn't misspeak, but I think he misunderstood what he was answering about whether foreign crew can be on a foreign boat when it's in the dry dock. Because in his mind it was work that you can't take jobs away from Americans on American soil.
Well, and I feel like dry dock, they're thinking, CBP is thinking very long-term commercial ship, 10 months in a yard.
Definitely had the commercial ship in it. And in further questioning, like, can the crew vacuum the rugs and, polish the silver and do what they normally do? He was like, all right, I need to look more into this. I'll go back and look up the answer and get back to you. That part did not make the internet.
Right.
The internet heard.
And instead the panic set in.
The internet heard foreign crew cannot work on boats when it's
out of the water.
In the shipyard.
Which is absolutely false.
That's correct.
And so I do know that it sent a lot of people, and so you were helpful in coordinating a meeting we had in Port Everglades at the CBP office.
Right. With, the head of small passenger vessel and small vessel and passenger entry from D.C., who's the big boss.
Yep.
Zoomed in.
Yes, he did.
And then the deputy director from the district, Tampa, Miami district, was in attendance, and then officers from different disciplines, because CBP has a couple of immigration, cargo entry, they have multiple areas.
And I have to say, they knew what the topic was for this meeting. This was not like, oh, the industry wants to come. And I have to say, I found it to be very pleasant, considering the CBP knew they were kind of a little in the hot seat with the industry. If there's such, I mean, we have such a good relationship and good communication, but they kind of knew, like, we're going to need to do some cleanup here. The industry is not happy with what this and how this presentation went and how this misinformation is going. But I have to say, you didn't get that sense at all from the meeting. It was very much kumbaya. There had to be 25 people in that meeting from every acronym of association and all the key people that I think you felt were important. Our federal lobbyist was there. Several facilities were represented there, crew agencies represented.
Triton and Dockwork were invited,
Yep.
as well as
Media was there.
the media that filmed
Correct.
the original. Everybody was in the room. That maybe there were a few people that got missed, but there was enough
But people
to
need
get
to
the
know
message
that
out.
too. So everybody was really coming together to say, how do we get this corrected?
How did we get here?
How did we get here? And let's get this corrected. And I also try to remind people, remember, CBP was only instituted in 2003. It's only been a little over 20 years. Remember, all of this came about, and I will say, I could toss a lifeline to Jordan, my producer. When was CBP founded? I feel like it was 2003. Jordan Boffner, by the way. And, I mean, remember, all of this came about after 9/11. Department of Homeland Security was created. So anyway, I guess my point is that this is not something that we've had, my company is 75 years and the association.
2003.
Oh, I was right. March 1st, 2003. And so in 22 years, not only have we gone through and worked with CBP, but CBP didn't exist. But CBP is now really, I feel, due to a lot of work that you've done, and specifically the marine industries, understanding our industry, understanding that we are trying to comply with their regulations, that we are not the industry that we want them to worry about, that we want to get the correct information out. And I think that you've been able to prove that.
Yes, they're very willing to work with us, and it is a case of not understanding, even when crew fly in with papers that say they're going to a yacht and the proper, because originally we had to have a letter, if you remember that.
I do. I remember that.
We crafted a letter that said, yacht crew, the appropriate visa is a B1 to work on they'd be entering the country to work on a yacht, because it's not commercial, because they were getting a commercial C1D, which only allows you 29 days in the country, and there's no extension, you're out. But that's for commercial vessels that aren't supposed to be cruising the United States. They come, they drop whatever cargo, and they leave. That's what that commercial crew does.
And they know, CBP understands that that's not what our crew does. And so even in this meeting, there was some going back and forth. So how did we conclude? I do know that we had asked for CBP to issue a statement clarifying what this statement meant, or how it's actually being enforced. Talk to me about that. And I know you got that about a week ago.
Well, we got it from local. We have not gotten the...
Okay, what does that mean?
The Tampa, Miami field office sent us a email that described basically that you could work in the boatyard. You can't do the bottom work. The work that the shipyard traditionally does is still the shipyard's
Correct.
job. You can't do that. If it's a job you would normally do on your boat...
So the example I heard was that the chef can cook for the crew.
Can feed the crew, absolutely.
And absolutely, that's what they normally do. Nobody would be hiring an outside contractor to come in during that yard period for cooking. So there's nobody's stealing a U.S. job, and that is the job that the crew was.
That ship usually...
So that was key. The other one that I heard, the point of clarification was the crew needed to either arrive from foreign with the boat or leave foreign.
Had to be one leg of the voyage had to be by
And
vessel.
it was even further clarified, because we were all sticking our hands way down in that what if bag. And so and I believe it was a lawyer at the table who asked the question, who said, okay, so the crew arrived foreign, but they're leaving to go to New England before they depart foreign. And my understanding was if it arrived foreign, so the crew member arrived with the boat foreign, the boat is not immediately leaving, but it's within that 6 months, it's within that 180 days, the crew can continue north or continue inside the continental United States as long as they depart within that 6 months.
What they cannot do is fly in,
Yep.
work, and fly out.
So don't arrive with the boat and don't depart with the boat and then spend time in the yard period working. That is where it would appear
Or
that that's a
even-
U.S. job.
Because because that's considered domestic service.
Right. But that's
Or-
not the case. That's not how our crew operate. We know that we do know that one of the issues was that for the I apologize for the inaccurate vernacular that I may say, but the rotation, the crew rotation, that sometimes people were saying, well, they fly in and maybe they rotate out before, well, then you're going to have to modify the rotation. So a crew member cannot fly in and not depart with the boat. But I find that unless it's under a very significantly long refit period, and if that's the case, that's going to be planned out and then the rotations would be coordinated from there. But that there really was no issue. There wasn't a new interpretation.
No,
There
no,
wasn't an old interpretation gone bad. It was just really a misunderstanding of kind of a point of clarification. Okay.
Nothing's really changed. They can
Nothing
come
has
in,
changed.
go into the yard. If it's an extended period and the captain wants key personnel to stay longer than 6 months, they can either file for an extension, you can even do it before your visa expires.
Do it before it expires.
And until you hear their determination, you're still legal. You won't get in trouble if you filed for the extension, as long as you don't wait 10 minutes before the thing expires to apply for it. So that they could say you had they had an engineer working on a project and they wanted them to be supervising the project through the whole thing. If they legitimately write what they want and ask for the extension, they're probably going to get it.
And the crew member has a proof of residency in another country, and the crew member is also receiving foreign pay.
Right.
So it's really just kind of follow the
Nothing's
rules.
changed.
None of it has changed, and I think it's key to have a good. What happens if you run into that CBP agent that is new, that maybe wasn't sure that.
And that happens a lot
Yeah.
when an agent transfers into this community, because most of our agents know the yachting community because they grew up with us figuring out the rules.
Absolutely, over the last 20 years.
Right. We have a lot of agents that are. We have a lot of experience in them, so it's not very painful around here. But they get a new agent or somebody gets transferred out, so they're filling a spot. It usually takes us a little while to get. They read the rule book. They understand what the rule says.
How to apply it.
How it gets applied and how it's interpreted is up to the agent, honestly, and it's up to the agent. You've got to answer honestly when they ask you questions. When you're clearing in. Younger crew get nervous. They think they're giving the right answer instead of giving the truthful answer.
Well, I agree, and I heard the propaganda that was also happening at that meeting that somebody misused a word deported, and I liked that CBP and yourself, I agree, sitting at the head of the table, I believe, corrected that immediately and said, our job is not to deport anyone. We are not actively out looking for crew that may or may not be staying past their particular visa time, or it's more of an after the fact. Walk me through that. So CBP is not walking around yards looking for crews and asking them for their visa booklet or
No,
a date.
To my knowledge, that's not happening.
And they admitted that they were not doing that.
Where we're ringing the bell is crew that perhaps came to the U.S. and didn't have a job
Okay.
and maybe did a little bit of day work illegally
Okay.
and then got a job
They knew they would.
They eventually got a job, and now they're working on a boat, and the boat goes to the Bahamas for a week, and they come back in, and the agent looks at the book and says, but you were here for 5 months. Mm-hmm. How did you support yourself?
Gotcha.
And if you were doing day work, doesn't matter whether you were on a foreign flag boat or a U.S. boat, day work is illegal.
Day work should be illegal for so many reasons. Don't get me started on my workers' comp. But soapbox, I could get on that one too. Day work should just be banished from everywhere. But
day work is legitimately illegal. It's always been illegal. You cannot do day work in the United States on a B-1 visa. And if they find that that's how you were supporting yourself, or you've perhaps stayed longer than 50% of a year in the United States, is another reason why they might question that you aren't, in fact, it's an intent to immigrate. You're not allowed to do that either. Mm-hmm. And if you're breaking those rules, they will generally say, you really should leave today, or we're going to make you leave.
Correct.
And you're given the option in most cases, because they're not being bad guys. You broke the rules. You got to go.
Right.
And if you take yourself out, you'll have the opportunity.
I was going to ask
come
that.
back. And if they give you your ride home, it may be 10 or more years before your visa will be issued again.
So really, who's advising crew to do any of this day work, or is it just the crew is excited to get a job and come to the U.S. in an opportunistic way? And
I do think it's difficult to get. Most of them come to the U.S. because that's where the boats are.
Or what if they lost their job here? Talk to me about that one too. Didn't mean to interrupt you on that.
You can actually look for a job.
I was going to say, isn't there something?
But you can't take a job.
So walk me through that. Okay, so I arrived on a foreign flag boat. I've been here about 3 months. Boat sold, all new crew. I'm let go. What do I do?
In March of 23, they passed a rule that if you have a B1, B2 visa, you're allowed to look for work in the United States.
So I could stay and continue to look for
But you have to support yourself, and you can't work while you're looking for work. You can't do day work or anything.
I can't, okay.
But you can look for work. You can fill out applications. You can go on interviews. You can look for work.
But you need to go home before you take the job.
Your contract should be signed
in your homeland.
Well,
okay.
Not home,
or
just
foreign.
out of the country.
Okay. That's good to know. But that's always been the case.
It is. They did say if you were on a boat and you wanted to change to another boat, you could do that.
Okay. So a lot of it, what I'm hearing is it sounds like there's a lot of common sense. It's a lot of communication. If your intention is to follow the law and your intention is to obey the rules, that likely you're really not going to run into any kind of trouble. And if you do, there's probably a mechanism there for you. File an extension, find the paperwork, whatever it is that you need to do. But if you're trying to avert the law, then that's where you run into the problem. But that's really not the case in our industry. We don't really have a lot of bad apples as much as we have misinformation.
Misinformation and a lot of. I stayed in the Holiday Inn Express last night, so I'm an expert. The crew tells the other crew what they should do, and maybe that's not always the right answer.
I think it was La Quinta. Is it Holiday Inn? I think it was, or no, maybe that was the high chair. You remember how you felt like a champion at the high chair? But it's good to know that CBP still has a very good open line of communication with the industry.
Their number one job is actually to encourage economy and business. It's a financial mandate, not necessarily a policing mandate.
That's interesting. Very much interesting.
But also, policing the laws, but they're supposed to encourage economic
commerce.
Yeah, commerce.
So talk to me also about cruising license. Now that is also with CBP?
That is also with CBP.
So we've gotten past, so at this point, because I feel like cruising licenses were an issue too, and that they were being, again, it was misinformation and misunderstanding. How does a cruising
Well, the
license work?
cruising license, the rules of the cruising license says that it's for, if the vessel is to be used for personal use, the owner's use, that the vessel may get a cruising license.
Okay.
It should not enter commerce in any way.
Be for sale.
Right.
Okay.
And unfortunately, CBP considers charter commerce. And a lot of websites put boats that aren't even for charter in their pictures. And on the,
I've seen that.
And it says this vessel is not for charter, but maybe one like it is, you know.
Right.
And unfortunately, when they Google the name of the boat and the first thing comes up is a full-page ad with small print down that denies that it's not for charter and it's listed on charter this boat,
Right.
it becomes a challenge to convince them not. And in some cases, with the principal, and the boats are registered not necessarily in Bob Jones, who owns the boat, but
Correct. It's in an LLC,
see.
Jones LLC.
right, because men with money, men and women with money, don't
Sure.
put all their assets in their personal names. They have corporations. So it took a little while to get them to understand that you're looking for some, you're looking for the March Hare. He's not there,
Right.
Because that's how this world works. So now they have to have the principal of the corporation can sign an affidavit that these are the dates he plans to use the boat, where he plans to go, and they'll give them a cruising license. It's just gotten a little more structured.
Okay. But a boat can come in, ask for the cruising license, and it's okay for the crew to be able to say, we're gonna be here for about 3 weeks ahead of time because we have to get the
Absolutely.
boat ready.
Absolutely.
And I feel like that
But
though at
once they have
one
a
point,
cruising license, they're usually 18 months. They
Okay.
can come and go as they please. Now, if a vessel is for sale, it doesn't restrict you. You are allowed to still visit the country. You can't show the boat to a U.S. owner, but you can still come in. And what you do is you have to, and it becomes a little burdensome because you have to check in at every customs district.
Correct.
But you can go from port to port.
you get a permission to proceed.
Yes, that's
Okay.
exactly it. So there are boats that are for sale or do charter and outside the United States.
Correct.
goes charter, that choose not to get a cruising license, but just work on permission to proceed to go from port to port.
And how much time do you have to lead for that, to permission to proceed? It's not like
24 hours. I don't
24
know.
hours, okay. So I guess the bottom line is, and we did ask CBP to attend and be on this season 3, and I understand if they can or they can't, but at the bottom line is CBP works very well with the industry, is a friend to the industry, holds us accountable. We have to abide by the
Rules are the
laws.
rules.
Rules are the rules. But at the end of the day, their willingness to work with us has just made all the difference in the world.
Well, I mean, the mandate was that the government was going to maintain a strict immigration policy, and the world was like up in
Sure.
arms and panicked. And I understand if somebody has their life, even if they're behaving, and
Absolutely.
they've obeyed the law, and all of a sudden they're hearing that they're going to be throwing everyone out, and all, it's. But
It's unsettling.
If you haven't broken the law, you're good. Don't worry about it, because they don't want the bad guy. They don't want the good guys. It's the ones that are not obeying
Sure.
the rules.
Sure.
And I don't know. I guess there was a lot of upheaval about that for a while. That everyone was, but there's nothing. And then the dock talk the internet gets a story about them hauling them off, and they're not true. When you get down to it,
That's not at all what happened.
not
It
what
has
happened.
nothing to do with immigration. Like I said, the CBP is not ICE. They're not intending to work with ICE. That's not their job. And so, Patience, one thing I did want to say, Patience Cohn, you are the industry liaison with the Marine Industries Association. How long have you been doing that?
19 years I've been
19
employed.
years. I know that you and I have served on the board together, But you've been single-handedly, I would say, one of the biggest advocates and champions for us as an industry, constantly still going to Washington. These relationships, there's a reason. I know you get beat up. You're either, what is it, you're the town hero or the village idiot. One way or the other, you get beat up over CBP. It's either all your fault or you are the hero. But I do think that I would credit you for sure with having that relationship and keeping that going and spending the time with the officers, especially after maybe they have encountered a vessel. Does CBP reach out to you at times and as an authority to go, what do you want us to do with this boat, or?
CBP, not so much. They pretty much have their. It's interesting. Once in a while, I'll get a call from Coast Guard, and they'll say, "Do you know where such and such a vessel is? They're here, but they haven't cleared in yet." And what usually has happened is an American captain has moved up in size.
Okay.
And perhaps he's used to coming freely back and forth moving freely throughout the country with an American flag and an American crew. And perhaps there's a little education that needs to happen.
Yeah, that's true.
We're very fortunate in leaving CBP, but the U.S. Coast Guard, particularly at Miami, which is where the
and there was just a changing of the guards for that.
Yes, last week.
Okay.
We have a new captain of the port, and he's a great guy, and we're very lucky because he just did a tenure as the deputy captain of the port.
Oh, excellent! So you already have that relationship, so that's
he's
important.
Just moved up.
Great.
And his son just got accepted to West Point, so he's happy, and the world is a good place.
Okay, good. Good to know.
And our captain of the port, Captain Cedarholm, is going to be the executive officer for the vice commandant.
Oh, very nice.
The executive assistant.
Yeah.
So that's even a great connection for us in D.C. as well.
So how do non-members, first off, is there a captain's membership, or should captains become a member of MIASF, or?
Well, we don't really have that. I mean, we're more in it. We do represent the industry, and that's why by helping the crew, we help the industry because the boats come. That's how that process works. There's
resources on the website.
There are resources. We posted the most recent letter. Mm-hmm. We have the old B1 visa letter, which is always good to. It's the same as it. The rules are the same as what it says in that in that letter, and so that's always good. I get calls with captains or crew with questions.
I think as a member, though, too, I mean, we are all interfacing with this crew. Obviously, me as electrical, but there's another air conditioning company, or there's somebody in hydraulics, or there's somebody doing interior, and we're all interfacing with them, and we're hearing all of their stories, or we're hearing how they may or may not have gotten in, or they had some trouble. And I think it's important for all of us to chime in. Well, I can help you with that. What do you need? I mean, we want to make sure that every one of these boats, regardless of the yard, regardless of the marina, regardless of the house that's behind, that they keep coming. And so I think if people hear something or hear of a negative experience, we should all chime in and say, we're here to help you in any way.
And I never don't take a call. If a crew member calls, I might, the advice I give them, it may not be what they want to hear. I may say, that's too complicated. You're going to need an immigration attorney if you want to do that. Or here, call this guy. He can
absolutely.
Or maybe you need to have an agent or depending. I would direct them towards the agency or the person that they should talk to.
Gotcha. So I wanted to go back to this day work, day job, day worker topic. I know for me, I look at it, and as an electrical company, I look at it as, I'm not even talking about somebody that's on a visa. I'm talking about a U.S. citizen. You're an American citizen. You work in the U.S., but somebody hires you as a day worker. That's illegal, regardless of your immigration status. You're a citizen. So to be in a yard, let me take that back.
No,
it's probably not
true.
illegal. It's probably
That's
not illegal. It's not illegal, but it is not covered by insurance and workers' comp. And if a yard takes somebody in as a day worker and they have exclusions under insurance, which we'll get to in another episode, they're not covered, and then therefore the yard is responsible for them. But so yards should not be letting in day workers anyway. But let's talk about day workers as it applies to crew, because I think I kind of misspoke before. But talk to me about day work and how is day work is actually illegal for foreign crew.
Yes, your B1, B2 visa says that will not work in the United States.
Okay, and so by definition, if they're working in the United States, not attached to the vessel,
Right, they're not crew.
the vessel is the opportunity allowing them, the vessel just happens to be in the U.S., but that's their place of employment,
Right.
the vessel. Okay, gotcha. So in my case, what I was talking about for day workers, it's not illegal as a U.S. citizen, but it is frowned upon from a workers' comp OSHA perspective.
You have that.
That's a separate. So I wanted to show
that's a different
clearance
world.
from a foreign crew. It's illegal.
This is back to the domestic employment we talked about.
Okay.
When you fly into the country,
Yep,
not to a boat,
correct.
you just fly into the country. You can look for a job,
But you can't earn money while you're here.
but you cannot work in the country. It's
Gotcha.
very specific in the rules. When you accept your B1 visa, you accept to abide by those rules.
Gotcha.
And the B1 visa is really intended for the German paper company that wants to sell to customers in America, and the salesperson can come into the country and visit all the clients that he wants to sell to, but he's being paid by his company in Germany to represent them here.
Gotcha.
He doesn't get to stay here. He just gets to come visit his clients and go back.
Okay.
That's kind of what the B1 visa is for. That kind of business.
So is day work in a foreign crew prevalent?
It's very prevalent. Unfortunately, it's been kind of the crew dirty little secret. And part of the problem is that this is where you come to find the good jobs.
I was just going to say, I mean, I don't think that is there so much of an intent to be in violation of the visa, or is it just you're already here and like you said, this is the place you come to get the job. So you're allowed to look for the job, you just can't work here. Okay.
And you can go to the Bahamas, sign the contract, and fly back.
Okay.
But you can't.
So what about if somebody says the argument of, oh my gosh, if we get rid of this day work, this is going to be detrimental to all of the crew that's out there, and we're going to end up with yachts without crew?
Nature loves a vacuum.
Okay. So it's not an issue that we're really concerned about from a workforce perspective.
I don't believe so.
Okay. And have we seen it on the rise or down, or it's just something we're talking about now because as it relates to immigration?
As it relates to immigration,
gotcha.
There's more attention paid to
So
the
6
fact
months
that-
ago, we weren't really talking about this because immigration wasn't as much of the issue. And the reality is we are an industry. We want to be law-abiding. We want the crew in our... Listen, without the crew, the vessel doesn't operate. If the vessel's not operating, the vessel's not here. Companies like me cannot get on the boat to do the work. So I support the crew and I want the crew, but we need them to do so lawfully and be helpful. So where can the crew get additional information? What are the resources? I know there's crew houses. I know there's associations, but talk to me. Should the crew go to get the right information?
It's in plain print on the CBP's
Okay.
website.
Just go to cbp.gov.
It is. We have several immigration attorneys that are members of ours, and they're listed in our directory. They'll speak to you briefly on
Sure.
To find out if you have a case that's client
Gotcha.
worthy, or if they'll be honest
So
with
there's
you.
plenty of resources to be helpful. Nobody is
And
trying to
I
throw
wouldn't-
out crew and be
Nobody wants to throw them out, but if you're thinking you're smarter than
CBP.
don't.
Okay.
And
don't push your luck, because in the end, it's going to catch up with you when you try to come back for that next job, for that dream job. You may not get your visa issued.
And honestly, and please don't anyone take this badly, but I worked in yachting for a long time. If we told the boss that a deckhand couldn't work for us anymore because he didn't have the right visa, or he would say, "Oh, yeah, Bob was a good guy."
Right. Right. Go find me another one.
Find another
Right.
one. I'm not saying that they're all important to the crew, but it's not this guy's not going to give up boating because
He's not going to give up yachting or the destinations he or she wants to go to because of a crew visa issue. They will just simply find the right crew to get it done. So
solve
bottom line,
solve the problem. It's
crew, follow the visas. They try to make it and bottom line, communication. When in doubt, reach out to CBP, reach out to the consulate in your country of origin, correct? In order
it doesn't hurt you have to have an international abode. You have to have a residence that is not in the United States. If you're on rotation, I recommend you don't go to see Mickey Mouse on your rotation. I recommend you go back to your foreign country and show that you're at your
Correct.
residence. Because when you go to renew your visa, or when you're coming in, the computer's not your friend. They used to go through and look at the stamps in your book. Now they call you up on a computer and it tells you how many days they don't even have to do the math anymore.
Right.
They can just look and see how many days you were in the country, and they can also see where you went and where you came from. So if you're not, I had someone call me the other day, had been in the country over 2 years and had only been out of the country like 100 days out of the 2 years, he came back in and they had given him a month to get out of the country, and he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, your residence is this country," and I said, "But you show me your record. You only spent 7 days there. You think they believe you live there?"
Do other countries have the same?
There are strong laws in all countries.
Right. So it's not any more burdensome here than it is for the most part in any other country.
They just don't have yacht jobs there, so nobody goes there.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's mainly because of the type of work that's being done here. Well, I mean, to me, it makes sense. The laws haven't changed. The interpretation hasn't changed. CBP is still very much supportive of the industry. We know exactly which visa to get and what to do. We just need to abide by the rules. Well, thank you for calling all of that out, Patience. Thank you for being on Season 3 of the Ward's Way podcast, and I appreciate you having you here today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us this season on Season 3 of the Ward's Way podcast. Be sure you subscribe because there's much more to come.